4 years ago, a new country was born. After decades of civil war with the north of Sudan, it was meant to be a dream come true. But today, South Sudan has disintegrated into chaos. The new president and vice president have gone to war with each other. It's a war with an ethnic dimension. It's caused 2 million people to leave their homes, and tens of thousands have been killed as fighting continues across the country. We're heading to Malakal, a town that's changed hands more than 6 times since fighting began in December 2013. Despite millions in international aid and government coffers once flush with oil money, almost no roads have been built in South Sudan. Most commercial airlines stopped flying when the war started, so we're traveling with soldiers on United Nations flights. There's a lot of armed guards across this airport. It's a UN base in Malakal. There was an attack here a few months ago. Several UN workers were kidnapped, so now there's heavy security everywhere. Even the UN now seems to operate in fear of the government it helped build. We were told government forces pushed the opposition a few miles downriver just days before we arrived. But things were still tense. This was a town of 150,000 people. It now feels like a ghost town. We've come to South Sudan to find out how a country that was born of so much promise has turned into such a nightmare. And also to ask, were there warning signs that this could happen? This is of a child?
No child, yeah. All these are children. This one. Over 10 years, 7 years.
When the fighting first broke out between government forces and rebels, thousands of people ran here to the Malakal teaching hospital, thinking they'd be safe. But then the rebel forces, loyal to former Vice President Riek Machar, entered the gates. How many people were killed here?
Yeah, 56 people.
56 people were killed inside the hospital.
In the bed also.
They killed patients in the beds?
They killed patients in the bed also. All citizens are here. And then when they saw shooting people, everyone has run away.
Daniel Ayokade dedicated the last 33 years of his life to this hospital. He says the guilt of leaving that day still haunts him.
Even now I crossed the river, left to Waushalo. And this one now is still alive now. If we are here when we kill all with patient.
When he was finally able to return, he told us the ward was full of dogs, gone wild from days of eating human flesh. You used to work in this place.
Yes, they come through me, then I take very long stick, and then I beat them. They run, they come inside again. Very bad. I am alone here, but when I go to soldiers there, I say that the dogs are wild, don't go there. God can help us.
Those who didn't escape across the Nile that night fled to the UN base a few miles from the center of Malakal. Today, a year later, their town lies empty, and this has become home. Rachel Maik taught elementary school before the war. Her husband was one of the patients at the Malakal teaching hospital.
They start killing people just randomly. And just On the side of the street, you see bodies of the people just thrown like that. Nobody to bury, nobody even to take, because everybody has ran for his own life.
By the time she returned to his side, she found him shot in his hospital bed, surrounded by other dead patients. It's this image, she says, that keeps her awake at night.
I still sometimes, when they come to my mind, I get disturbed. If these people came and they were looking for the soldiers, nobody could talk. But the ordinary people, the civilian, the elderly, even those who are crazy, who were on the streets of Malakal, all of them got killed. You feel bad, really, and you feel like if something could just take you out of here.
Initial reports estimate at least 50,000 have been killed since fighting broke out in December 2013. But Rachel said the number is much higher.
If in my own family alone, I have more than 10 from the side of my husband and from my family, what of the other families?
And people are still here because they're scared.
Yeah, because there is no peace yet and security in Malakal, not yet.
So you've got nearly 20,000 people here.
They are here.
Because it's the only safe place.
Yeah.
People were still arriving, sometimes fleeing violence in towns so remote they can only be reached by boat. Naibol Anok was brought in after rebel militias attacked her family just days ago. Her head was cut by machetes, and she was left for dead. Her daughter Nyobol told us there were more survivors from her village making their way down the Nile. We went to see if we could find them. We're going to a village of Warjawak, just upstream from Malakal. There's a group of people who fled the fighting and just got here, so we're going to see what's going on. Why did you come here?
And then in God Yagudi, you know, go be about colon yoga and a yadi. Kajawaga yadi.
Assalamu alaikum. كيف حالك؟
ده النور ياو شاكل ما هنا ده ماتار قتل الناس شديد ياو جريلة هنا نور لسه في أطار ما فات
لسه في أطار. This is a 20-year-old girl called Achol who just fled from Athar. She said there's a lot of fighting there and there's a lot of killing by opposition forces, and she just got here by boat yesterday. أنت شفتي قتل؟ كم واحد؟
كويس.
There's hundreds of people here just living out in the open. They've got their bags of belongings, little bits of food. This is what parts of South Sudan look like today. Under every tree, people huddled, scared, tired, in shock from what they've just fled. Two aid doctors arrived to assess the levels of malnutrition and tend to the living. But there's no formal tally of the dead. So many people died at that same time. Before she left her home, Akol said she watched as her young son was killed. At least that, she said, was certain. While South Sudan's president Salva Kiir and his former deputy Riek Machar wage war, the story of the country's birth, and in many ways the roots of the crisis, could be said to have started here in the United States. It goes all the way back to the 1990s, when Sudan was locked in a bloody civil war between North and South.
We called ourselves the Council.
It became clear that perhaps the country in the world that was suffering the most, where the United States could maybe make the biggest difference, was Sudan.
For most of us, it was not just a professional issue, it was a personal issue.
Eric Reeves is an English professor at Smith College, not far from Boston. John Prendergast was at the State Department, but he's probably best known for traveling to war-torn parts of Sudan with George Clooney. Ted Danier spent 2 decades at the Congressional Research Service, mostly writing reports on Sudan.
And this is Brian De Silva. This is the Emperor.
That's you.
That's me. And this is Roger Winter, whose nickname is the Spare Carrier.
The men bonded over their devotion to a new rebel army in the south, fighting the Islamist government of Sudan.
Most of the time we met at Otello's restaurant on Connecticut Avenue. Roger always ordered soup de pêche, and Ted always had the filet. We figured out what needed to be done. We figured out whose butt to kick.
We felt that if we could build up champions in Congress, that would increase the odds of the United States becoming more deeply engaged and involved.
I was asked to join the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the Subcommittee on Africa. That gave me a lot of, access and influence.
We told Congress, or those in Congress who would listen to us, what kinds of resolutions they needed to be writing, what kind of legislation they needed to be passing.
The council had one enemy and one hero. The enemy was Khartoum, seat of the Sudanese government.
What did you want people to know about Khartoum?
I wanted people to know that this regime was evil. I've thought a lot about the meaning of the word evil. I wanted to get people to understand that if there is evil in this world, it resides in Khartoum.
They use their aircraft to bomb, to terrorize people. They use their army basically to destroy whatever is in their way.
If Khartoum was the enemy, the council's hero was rebel leader John Garang. Garang had been a graduate student in Iowa, but he returned home in the 1980s to found the Sudan People's Liberation Army, or SPLA, to fight the government of Sudan.
So this is a calculated, cold-blooded genocide that is going on. And this government claims to be a government of the Sudan. It isn't. It's a government of killers. It should be condemned. Sanctions should be made against this government. It should be isolated.
He was not only militarily brilliant, but he was politically extremely astute. He understood the international community. And he was charismatic, if that word has any meaning.
You could see the passion in John Garang about equality, independence, democracy.
Those who are struggling to defend themselves must be assisted.
The SPLA was fighting for regime change in Khartoum. And with the help of the council, they found a powerful ally in the United States. Susan Rice, then Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, had started coming to the meetings at Otello's too, and would play a key role.
We knew that what was happening was ethnically targeted civilian destruction in order to destroy the civilian base of support for the rebels.
We were able to convince a number of key members of Congress that this is a struggle that needs to be supported, and this is an atrocity that must be stopped.
We're in touch every day, strategizing, coordinating our efforts to ensure that the end game of a just peace was realized.
There was a love affair between many of the leading US advocates and John Garang. They adored him.
And you think they were mistaken?
John Garang was extremely personally impressive and charming. Now, we all know. I mean, I'm sure you've interviewed impressive and charming dictators around the world.
Alex de Waal has spent his career studying Sudan. He said on the ground, many saw a different man,
He was completely ruthless. He was utterly centralized. He was completely intolerant of dissent. In demonizing Khartoum, one of the side effects of that was to promote the SPLA as heroes and as angels. They were neither of those things. The human rights record of the SPLA throughout the entire war has at no time been any better than the human rights record of the Sudan government.
Whatever the truth about that record, there's no doubt that Garang's rebel army grew stronger with the backing of their US friends. At the same time, another movement was also gaining power in Washington.
This is a passage in the Bible from Isaiah 18 that's talking about Sudan. Woe to the land of whirring wings along the rivers of Cush, which sends envoys by sea in papyrus boats over the water. Go, swift messengers, to a people tall and smooth-skinned.
Evangelical Christians were finding new influence, and South Sudan became their rallying cry.
These were just innocent people trying to live their lives, and bombs were falling on them.
Stories of northern Muslims holding southern Christians as slaves became a critical turning point for American support for the South Sudanese.
There are poor people in many parts of the world. There are wars in many parts of the world, but it was the fact that people were enslaved, of course, especially women and children, that was so shocking to many people. It motivated me. Well, we're going now to meet with the trader and slaves. We understand that there are 320 slaves that have recently come back with one trader, and we'll go to meet with him.
Eibner and others made dozens of trips to Sudan to negotiate with alleged slave traders. The campaign was wildly successful, but also controversial.
All right, that's 6 million.
While there was certainly an element of reality in what they were doing, many in the South, including SPLA commanders, quickly exploited this as a money spinner. Rather gullible foreign missionaries would come in with large amounts of money, and these commanders would simply round up local kids and coach them to say, you're former slaves, aren't you?
But the campaign sparked outrage among Americans and paved the way for more direct US involvement. By the late 1990s, Washington had imposed comprehensive sanctions on Sudan and vacated their embassy in Khartoum.
Instead of the real complexities of Sudan, in which good and bad are not to be found in simply on one side or the other, was reduced to a very, very simplified script. And that sort of simplified moral script makes a very bad policy.
In South Sudan today, the extent of the crisis that's unfolding reaches everywhere. Thousands of children like Nyalel have been orphaned over the past 15 months. Nyalel lives with her grandmother now and helps take care of 2 younger brothers.
What do you remember of the war? What happened? How did you know the war had started?
It's estimated 500,000 kids like Nyalel have been forced from their studies because of the war. Your life has really changed. What's the biggest change for you? The base here in Bentiu is literally on the front line. Government troops hold one side and opposition troops the other, with UN soldiers minding the boundaries. It's hard to see this as a long-term solution. Even gathering firewood carries huge risks for women who say they're afraid of the soldiers outside the gates.
The destruction you saw in Malakal, and Bentiu and Bor, worse is the disruption of the social fabric. The Nuers can't speak to the Dinkas, the Nuers can't speak to the Shuruks.
This war has been explained by many outsiders as an ethnic conflict between different and opposing communities. But for many of those we met, that's not what's happening.
In the first place, the two wars were wars of liberation. You can say people were fighting for their rights. They were fighting against repression and oppression. This one is a war over power, and it has no justification whatsoever.
Seeing the bodies is actually a thing that you cannot forget, seeing dead bodies. So those images, they just always remain at your eyes.
Daniel Deng is an aid worker. An ethnic Dinka, he told us that he found it hard to believe the fighting began because of deep-rooted tribal animosity. But it's now spiraled into something that will take a long time to heal.
So these are things maybe only the government knows. But for us as civilians, sometimes I think it's difficult for us to understand the reason why they are doing that. There's nobody who is not angry. Everybody's angry.
When the conflict broke out, it immediately took on an ethnic dimension. And it did so not because these ethnic groups hate each other or they're intrinsically opposed to each other, but because the way in which the money had been shared out and the constituencies had been built by the members of the elite was ethnic. The dispute within the SPLM was over who would be at the top. There is no political agenda beyond power.